Hello. The ever-increasing complexity of string crossing patterns, barilage over 2, 3, and 4 strings that composers of the 18th century outbid each other to achieve makes the methodical study of string crossing techniques and formula an absolute number one for the Baroque violinist. In a previous video, which I called String Crossings Part 1, we learned about the importance of the wrist, not only to guide the bow along the string at fast tempi, but also to change strings, to cross strings in both a clockwise and an anti-clockwise direction. And in this video, we're going to focus on a collection of studies made up by the great Czech pedagogue Otakar Ševčik for just that purpose. And you might say, why use 20th century material for studying 17th and 18th century music? And my answer is simple. Ševčik's oeuvre is the most thorough and the most exhaustive collection of exercises, of formula for different kinds of string crossing that anyone could ever hope possibly to put together. So I make no apologies for using Ševčik with my students, as indeed I have practiced myself. So when we have a formula such as this one, that was from an imaginary Vivaldi concerto that I just made up. When we have a formula like that, it's worth studying the basic techniques of it in detail. And in the previous video that I talked about, we decided that using exaggerated movements was a good way of learning them. Later we could tame those exaggerated movements and cut them down to suit our exact purpose. So what we worked on is putting the bow on the A string and raising the wrist so that I reach the D and lowering it so I reach the E. So I'm going to go from one string to the other. Now, if I was needing to play those notes, I wouldn't use just the wrist, but for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to use just the wrist. And here's the first formula from Ševčik's Opus 2. Now, the exercises that we're going to work on in this video are numbers 356 to number 370. Perfect for our needs. And I'm going to suggest that instead of going one by one, we actually skip one each time. In other words, we'll do just the odd numbers, and then we'll come back and do just the even numbers. And my reason for this is very simple. What Ševčik does is he suggests a formula, in this case, one lower note and 3 higher notes. And in the following exercise, he does the exact opposite, 1 higher note and 3 lower notes. So rather than constantly repeating the same formula, only the other way around, as it were, we're going to change the formula each time. So we're going to start off with 356 and then do 358, etc. I won't do them all in this video. So, using the horizontal movement of the wrist to actually make the sounds, and the vertical movement of the wrist to cross the strings, here's the formula. of number 356. And I'm going to practice that a little faster until it's fairly presentable. And then I'm going to move down to the tip, because at the tip, the movements of the hand are always going to be necessarily larger than they will be in the middle of the bow. And so I'm going to put my bow on the level of the two strings and then repeat the formula using just my wrist. And I'm going to try and make as singing a noise as possible, because it's very important to, when we're practicing what we call technique or facility, whatever you like to call it, that we always try and create something which will be usable in the repertoire. So, for example, if I were going to try and control the bow wonderfully, make that kind of sound, well, I'm not sure what I'll be learning. I certainly won't be learning to manufacture something which will be usable. So I'm going to disregard what I call useless technique and focus on usable technique. So I'm going to make a singing sound using just the wrist. And I can do this a little faster. And as I speed up, I'm going to move a little bit towards the middle of the bow. And it's very important while I'm doing this that the rest of the body hangs loose. It's completely without any kind of tension, any kind of willpower, the willpower to do well. Let's just let that all go. All that's happening is that. It's just movements of the wrist. I've achieved probably my maximum speed, making sure that there's good contact with the strings, so it's not slithering around like that. Of course, if I do want to use more bow, then the wrist ceases to be the driver. The forearm starts to be the driver, like that. But the wrist maintains its function as the string crosser. So it's forearm, wrist, wrist, forearm. When I've practiced this formula, I'm going to skip one, as I said, and take up the next one, which is number 358. And here we have one lower note and then one higher note. So that. And I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to put the bow on the A string. Very exaggerated movement. When I've got that, I'm going to go down to the tip. And do exactly the same as before. So speeding up a little bit. Until I get to the middle. Now, I could also obviously start off with the bow on the D string and go across from the G to the A in exactly the same way. So when I get to the tip, then I'm going to play just on the D and A, or just on the G and D. So that's the way I'm going to work through these exercises, practicing each one for as long as it takes to be absolutely comfortable. I always think of these Ševčik exercises as representing one more untied knot in one's technique. In other words, it might feel a little bit awkward when you start, but when you loosen up and it becomes more fluent, then it is as if you had untied are not. And so you've advanced in your bow technique just that little bit. Now, when I've gone through all the even and the odd numbers, I'm going to add the left hand. Coordination with the left hand, of course, is very important. So I'm going to go back to number 356. Remember, that is this one. And I'm going to use the notes that Ševčik suggests. Now, he repeats the formula 4 times. I think I'm going to repeat it a little bit more than that, probably 6 times. So I'm going to start at the tip, making a singing noise as I can. Etc. And then I'm going to come a little bit towards the middle. I can also do it just 4 times. Etc. Or I can do it 3 times. Or 2. I wouldn't do it 1. And then I'm going to go down, putting the bow, basic bow level on the D and A strings, and continue with Ševčik notes. Letting the body free as possible. And then down to the G and D. Same thing again. Always let go of the body. Allow the head to float. And that's how I'm going to go through all of these. And I'm going to try and even phrase them to avoid getting into that very dangerous path of sheer instrumentalism where all that counts is the correct notes at the correct time. So I can phrase the first one, for example, that harmony is stronger than the second one. So maybe this is stronger, etc., etc. So I will learn to phrase. Now, playing absolutely in rhythm is synonymous with control, and we need to know how to play absolutely in rhythm. And for that, a metronome is a very useful device. It shows you exactly what you're doing. Are you playing in rhythm, or are you altering the rhythm to suit your technical problems? So if we find we're playing something like that, we need to adjust that. When we play in an orchestra or an ensemble, we need to be able to play absolutely in rhythm. So metronome's very good, but it also presents certain dangers, because again, we can get into this habit of playing in a very mechanical way simply because the metronome is itself mechanical. So we have to do what I call beat the metronome, if you like. It has its absolute strict rhythm, and we have our strict rhythm, but we have it with a lyrical sound as well. I think if you practice these exercises, you will be so much more freer when it comes to string crossings. In another video, we'll talk about crossing over 3 strings, a bit more complicated. So I hope you enjoy your practicing, and goodbye for now.